My husband demanded a divorce when I was 68 years old. He intended to strip me of everything, our home, our vehicles, and every cent in our accounts. When I met with my lawyer, he practically yelled at me to fight back instead of surrendering. Yet, I remained composed and placed my signature on every single document he put in front of me. Richard spent the next 2 weeks in a state of celebration, until the morning, a knock sounded at his front door. Hello to all my dear listeners. It's Clara back with you again. I am so grateful you've joined me today. Please take a moment to like this video, stay with me until the very end of my story, and drop a comment letting me know which city you're tuning in from. I love seeing just how far these words travel. For 43 years, I lived under the impression that I truly knew the man I married. Together, we had constructed a life brick by brick. A modest 2-story home in the suburbs of Ohio, 2 successful grown children, 3 beautiful grandchildren, and what I believed was an impenetrable foundation of mutual trust. At 68, I felt I had earned every gray hair on my head and the simple right to enjoy my retirement in tranquility. Or, at least, that was the illusion I lived in. The first fracture in our foundation appeared on a nondescript Tuesday morning in March. Richard walked down to breakfast wearing cologne. In over 4 decades of marriage, that man had never once worn fragrance to his accounting firm. Just a client meeting, he muttered, refusing to meet my gaze as he snatched up his briefcase and hurried out. A knot of unease twisted in my stomach, but I forced myself to ignore it. After 40 years, surely I was just being paranoid, right? But the red flags began to spread like weeds in a garden. There were the hushed phone calls he took late at night, shivering in the garage. There were the weekend golf tournaments that left him with bizarre sunburns, his left arm bronzed from driving, while his right remained pale. Then there were the receipts for high-end restaurants I'd never visited, tucked carelessly into his coat pockets. Whenever I gathered the courage to ask, he would sigh with heavy exasperation, as if I were the one being irrational. Business dinners, Margaret, you wouldn't understand. The truth was, I understood far more than he gave me credit for. I had been the one navigating our household finances for decades while he climbed the corporate ladder. I was intimately familiar with every account, every investment, and every asset we owned. And I was starting to notice the discrepancies. Then the flowers started arriving. They weren't for me, they hadn't been for me in a long time. I would overhear him on the phone, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. Yes, roses, the deep red ones. You know, the ones she likes. That tenderness in his tone felt like a blade twisting between my ribs. When was the last time he had spoken to me with that kind of warmth? I could have confronted him right then. A part of me screamed to do it, but something held me back, an instinct sharpened by years of observing, waiting, and managing. I had always been the anchor, the strategist of the family. While Richard was out chasing accolades and promotions, I was the one keeping the family functioning and the house standing. I wasn't going to make a move until I knew exactly what I was up against. I began to pay closer attention. I watched the way he would tilt his phone screen away whenever a text came through. I tracked the inexplicable charges on our credit cards, jewelry boutiques, luxury hotels, pricey wines, always paired with cashback requests, a clumsy attempt to mask the true totals. Did he really think I was that blind, or did he just think I was stupid? Everything shattered on a Thursday evening in early May. I had prepared his favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, exactly the way his mother used to make it. He barely took a bite, nervously moving the food around his plate like a brooding teenager. "Margaret," he finally said, his fork hitting the china with a definitive clink. "We need to talk." My heart was thundering against my chest, but I kept my voice level. "About what, dear?" He couldn't even look at me. After 43 years of sharing a life, the coward couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes. "I want a divorce." The words lingered in the air like thick smoke. Deep down, I had known this moment was coming, but hearing it out loud still felt like a physical strike to the gut. "I see," I replied softly. "And may I ask why?" He launched into a prepared speech, no doubt rehearsed in front of a mirror or whispered into the ear of another woman. "We want different things now. I need space to find myself, to find himself." At 71 years old, Richard was going on a journey of self-discovery. "I want to make this easy," he continued, his voice slipping into that patronizing, professional tone I had grown to despise. "I've already spoken with a lawyer. I'm prepared to be generous." Generous. That word made me want to either laugh hysterically or scream at the top of my lungs. I did neither. "I'll be taking the house," he said, checking items off his fingers as if he were reading a mundane grocery list. "The car, the Lexus, obviously. the savings accounts, and the investment portfolio. You can keep your jewelry and your personal belongings. Of course, how incredibly magnanimous of him. And the lake house? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. That too, it's in my name after all. Everything was in his name. I had never felt the need to question it before. Why would I? We were partners. We were a team. I've already had the paperwork drawn up, Richard said, sliding a manila folder across the table toward me. My attorney says this is fair. More than fair, actually. You should probably have your own lawyer look them over. But Margaret? He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes chilled me to the bone. There was nothing. No remnant of love, no flicker of regret, no recognition of the life we had built together. Don't fight me on this. It will only make things uglier. Was that a threat? Coming from the man who promised to love me in sickness and in health until death? I looked down at the folder, my hands shaking. Inside were the documents that would delete 43 years of history as if they were a mistake. I'll need some time to think, I said. Richard shrugged indifferently. Take a week, but Margaret, I'm not changing my mind. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with that unopened folder in front of me, taking a mental inventory of my life. 43 years, 2 children I had raised largely on my own while he focused on his career. A home I had scrubbed, decorated, and cared for. Thousands of meals cooked, every holiday orchestrated. I had managed his mother's long illness, staying by her bedside when he was too busy with work. I had sacrificed my own teaching career so he could take that promotion in Cincinnati. And what did I have to show for it? Legally, it seemed I had nothing. Everything belonged to Richard. The house, the cars, the investments, even the lake house we had purchased together 15 years ago. I had never even thought to check whose name was on the deed. Why would I have ever doubted him? We were married. We were supposed to be a single unit, a partnership. I felt like such a fool. The terror began to hit me in relentless waves. At 68 years old, what was I actually expected to do? Rebuild my entire existence from scratch? Scour the city for a tiny apartment I couldn't afford? Was I really destined to live on whatever meager scraps Richard deigned to toss my way? My social security benefits would barely cover a roof over my head, let alone the cost of actual living. I had no career to return to and no source of independent income. I had allowed myself to become entirely dependent on a man who was now discarding me with as much thought as one gives to yesterday's newspaper. My hands were trembling violently as I finally forced myself to open that manila folder. The legal jargon was dense and deliberately convoluted, but the grim reality at the bottom was crystal clear. Richard was taking everything. In exchange for 43 years of my life, I would receive a tiny monthly stipend, a pittance that wouldn't even guarantee survival. I should call a lawyer, I whispered to the empty room. I should fight this. But even the thought of a conflict felt exhausting. Legal battles required a fortune I didn't possess, and I knew Richard's representation would be top tier and ruthless. He would drown me in a sea of paperwork and legal fees until I was forced to accept whatever crumbs he offered. Unless I sat up a little straighter as a spark of an idea began to flicker. Richard believed I was helpless. He saw me as nothing more than a simple housewife who couldn't grasp the complexities of business. For years, he had been patronizing me, dismissing my thoughts and patting my hand as if I were a slow-witted child. But he had overlooked something vital. I wasn't stupid. You don't manage a household for over 4 decades without learning how to plan, how to strategize, and how to execute a vision. The following morning, I called our daughter, Jennifer. "Mom," she answered, the surprise evident in her tone. We had grown distant over the years, a rift that was likely as much my fault as it was hers. "Is everything all right?" "Your father wants a divorce," I said. I didn't sugarcoat it. There was a long, heavy silence. "What, Mom? No, he wouldn't." "He would," I replied firmly. "He already did. Jennifer, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. Has your father seemed different lately when you've spoken to him?" Another pause stretched between us. "He's been acting strange," she finally admitted, her voice sounding distracted. "And there was this woman at his firm's holiday party last month. I didn't think much of it at the time, but..." "What woman?" "Young, maybe 35. She wouldn't stop touching his arm and laughing at everything he said. He introduced her as an associate, but Mom..." The way they looked at each other, there it was. The confirmation of the truth I already carried in my gut. A small, desperate part of me had hoped I was wrong, that maybe this really was just some cliché midlife crisis about finding himself. But no, there was someone else, of course there was. "Mom," Jennifer's voice cracked with emotion. "What are you going to do?" I'm going to be smart about this, I said, surprised by the sudden steel in my own voice. Jennifer, I need you to do something for me. Do not tell your father we've spoken. Don't tell him a single thing. Can you do that? Of course, but... And I need the name of a high-quality lawyer, not a divorce attorney, not yet. I need someone who specializes in financial investigations. Can you find someone like that for me? Financial investigations? Mom, what are you planning? I looked down at the divorce papers scattered across my kitchen table, at the house I had turned into a home, and the life I had built, only to have it hijacked. I am planning, I said slowly, to discover exactly what your father has been hiding. Because in 43 years of marriage, Jennifer, I've learned one thing. When a man suddenly tries to leave with every cent, it's because he's terrified of something. And I'm going to find out exactly what that is. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my kitchen and finally allowed the emotions to surface. The fear, the fury, the staggering grief. I gave myself exactly 10 minutes to weep. Then I dried my face, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and went to work. Jennifer called back within 2 hours with a lead. David Chen, a forensic accountant who had assisted a friend during a brutal business breakup. He's expensive, Mom, she warned, but he's the best. I used funds from my personal account, the one Richard allowed me to keep for groceries and household errands, to cover the initial consultation. Mr. Chen's office was located in a sleek, glass high-rise in downtown Cincinnati. The environment made me feel small and aged, but when he shook my hand, his eyes were perceptive and kind. Mrs. Patterson, he said, gesturing toward a leather chair. Tell me the whole story. I laid it all out. The sudden demand for a divorce, the papers that stripped me of everything, and my suspicions regarding another woman. When I mentioned the financial inconsistencies I'd spotted, he leaned forward with genuine interest. Do you have access to the bank statements or credit records? I manage our primary household account, I explained. But Richard maintains several accounts I can't access directly. I only see the trail when he moves money between them. That is more than enough to start. Mr. Chen's smile was sharp, almost predatory. Mrs. Patterson, I need to be blunt. If your husband is concealing assets or involved in financial misconduct, proving it will take time, and it will get uncomfortable. He will eventually realize you're digging. Are you truly prepared for that? Was I? I thought of Richard's icy stare across the dinner table and the way he had already scrubbed me from his future. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own home. I surreptitiously photographed every document I could find in Richard's private study. Bank records, investment ledgers, even discarded receipts. I set up an encrypted email address he didn't know existed and funneled everything to Mr. Chen. I felt like a criminal prowling through my own hallways, but the alternative was a total surrender, and I wasn't ready to lose. Richard sensed the shift. He had too. I stopped asking about his schedule and stopped making any effort at conversation. I was polite but distant, playing the role of the defeated, submissive wife perfectly. Have you given those papers any more thought? He asked one evening, trying to sound casual. I'm still weighing my options, I replied. His jaw tightened. Margaret, dragging this out isn't going to change the outcome. I've been incredibly generous with you. Have you really? The words escaped before I could check them. Richard's eyes narrowed into slits. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said quickly, retreating. I just want to ensure I fully comprehend everything before I sign. It's a big decision. There's nothing to comprehend. It's a standard agreement. But there was a new note in his voice, hesitation. He was starting to wonder what I was doing. Good, let him worry. 2 days later, Mr. Chen called. Mrs. Patterson, you need to come to my office immediately. We have a lot to discuss. The drive downtown felt like it took a lifetime. When I walked in, Mr. Chen looked incredibly grave. I found something, he said, spreading a series of documents across his desk. Actually, I found several things. Mrs. Patterson, has your husband ever mentioned a company called Meridian Consulting? I shook my head. No, why? Because he is the sole owner. He registered it 3 years ago. According to these records, Meridian Consulting has been receiving massive payments from your husband's accounting firm. Payments that look suspiciously like kickbacks for steering high-value clients towards specific vendors. My stomach did a slow roll. That's illegal. Highly. And there's more. Your husband has been systematically draining your joint assets and funneling them into accounts owned by Meridian. In the last 12 months alone, he has transferred nearly $200,000. $200,000? I felt lightheaded. He's been plotting this exit for a long time, Mr. Chen continued. He's been hiding marital assets and creating a paper trail to make it seem like he's worth far less than he truly is. If you sign those divorce papers, you are signing away your legal right to a fortune that is half yours. Can we prove this? My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. We can, but Mrs. Patterson, if we bring this to light, we aren't just talking about a divorce settlement. This is fraud, potentially criminal fraud. Your husband could face prison time. Are you prepared for the fallout of that? I thought about that young woman at the party touching his arm. I thought about the cologne and the cold, late nights. I thought about the 43 years he was trying to delete from history. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. That night, Richard returned home late, trailing a scent of perfume that definitely wasn't mine. He found me in the living room with the divorce papers sitting on the coffee table. Finally ready to sign? He asked, a smug smile tugging at his lips. I looked up at this man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and I smiled right back. Actually, I said sweetly, I have a few questions first. Specifically about Meridian Consulting. The color vanished from his face instantly. How do you? He stopped, trying to regain his composure. That's just a minor business venture. It has nothing to do with our divorce. Doesn't it? I kept my tone light and innocent, because it seems like a staggering amount of our life savings has been flowing into it lately. Richard's mask finally shattered. For a fleeting second, I saw raw terror flash in his eyes. Then it was replaced by a cold, sharp anger. You've been snooping, he spat, his voice turning dangerous. You've been going through my private files. Our files? I corrected him gently. We are still legally married, Richard, and this is a community property state, if you recall. He took a menacing step toward me, and I forced myself to hold my ground. Margaret, he growled, you are making a mistake, a massive one. Sign the papers, take the deal I gave you, don't make this ugly. Or what? I asked. He had no answer. The look in Richard's eyes was a map of the territory ahead. It told me everything I needed to know. The war had officially begun. The following morning, I seized the initiative. I filed for divorce on my own terms, represented by Patricia Holloway, a sharp, relentless attorney specializing in high-asset dissolutions. While the process servers were delivering the papers to Richard at his office, I was across town at Mr. Chen's, signing the affidavits required to freeze all our joint accounts and lodging formal complaints regarding the Meridian Consulting irregularities. Richard arrived home that evening like a localized thunderstorm. He didn't knock or call out. He slammed the front door with such violence that the window panes rattled in their frames. What the hell do you think you're doing? He bellowed, charging into the kitchen. I didn't flinch. I was calmly preparing dinner. Making a salad, I replied. Would you like some? Don't play these games with me, Margaret. His face was a dangerous shade of crimson, a vein thumping rhythmically in his temple. You've frozen every account. You filed complaints with my firm. Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? I have every idea, I said, setting my knife down and turning to meet his fury. I've protected what is legally mine. What is legally ours? There is no ours anymore, he screamed, his self-control evaporating. I'm divorcing you. That money, those accounts, they belong to me. I'm the one who earned it. We'll let the court be the judge of that. For a split second, I genuinely thought he might strike me. His fists were white-knuckled, his entire frame vibrating with rage, but he caught himself and recoiled. You're going to regret this, he said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal simmer. I have lawyers, Margaret, expensive ones. They will tie you up in litigation for years. You'll spend every cent you have just trying to keep up with the fees. And you'll still lose, I countered. Or perhaps the court will simply be curious about where $200,000 of marital assets vanished to. His eyes widened. You can't prove a thing. I allowed myself a small smile. Richard, I have managed this household's finances for 43 years. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize the patterns, the transfers, the hollow shell of a consulting company? Before he could snap back, the doorbell rang. Richard's head whipped toward the sound. Expecting someone? I asked with feigned innocence. I already knew who it was. I'd watched her flashy, brand new red BMW pull into the driveway. When Richard remained frozen, I walked to the door and opened it myself. She was younger than Jennifer had estimated, perhaps 40. She was a polished blonde with meticulously applied makeup, wearing a dress that likely cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She looked at me with a sickening blend of pity and condescension. You must be Margaret, she said. I'm Vanessa Caldwell, a friend of Richard's. A friend, I echoed. How lovely, please come in. I was just preparing dinner, there's more than enough. Vanessa looked past me toward Richard, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. This clearly wasn't the script she had rehearsed. In her mind, the wronged wife was supposed to be a sobbing, hysterical mess. Margaret, Richard started, but I cut him off. No, let her in. I think it's high time we all had a conversation, don't you? Vanessa stepped inside, the sharp click of her heels echoing on the hardwood floors I had polished just the day before. She moved directly to Richard's side, a territorial gesture intended to mark her claim. Richard mentioned you were being quite difficult about the divorce, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. I wanted to come here, woman to woman, to help you understand that this is for the best. You and Richard have simply grown apart. Surely you can see that? What I can see, I said, my voice steady and cold, is that my husband has been embezzling funds from his firm and hiding marital assets to finance a midlife crisis. What I see is a woman who is complicit in fraud. The real question, Vanessa, is whether you knew about the financial crimes or if you were just blinded by the expensive dinners and jewelry. Vanessa's face went ghost white. What? I don't. That necklace you're wearing, I continued, nodding toward her throat. Cartier, if I'm not mistaken. Purchased 4 months ago with funds from Meridian Consulting, money Richard effectively stole from our marriage and likely from his employer. Technically, that puts you in possession of stolen property. You're insane, Vanessa hissed, her hand instinctively flying to the diamonds at her neck. Am I? We'll see what the authorities think. Richard grabbed Vanessa's arm. We're leaving. Now? An excellent idea, I said. Oh, and Richard, the locks will be changed by tomorrow. This is my home as much as yours, and I no longer feel safe with you here. My attorney is filing a restraining order. If you need your belongings, she will coordinate a supervised visit. You can't do that? Actually, I can. Feel free to consult those expensive lawyers of yours. I held the door wide. Goodbye, Richard. Vanessa, they retreated, the sound of Vanessa's frantic heels and Richard's muffled curses fading into the evening air. I shut the door, locked it, and leaned my weight against it. Only then did I allow myself to shake. The next few days were a disorienting blur of locksmiths, legal filings, and sleepless nights. I moved into the guest room, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. Richard's lawyer sent a barrage of threatening letters. Vanessa left vitriolic voicemails, calling me a bitter, pathetic old woman clinging to a corpse of a marriage. Maybe she was right, but I wasn't surrendering. On the 4th day, Jennifer arrived with groceries and homemade soup. She pulled me into a hug and sighed. Mom, you have to rest. You look completely exhausted. She was right. I was running on nothing but adrenaline, caffeine, and pure, unadulterated stubbornness. Take a few days, she pleaded. Let the lawyers handle the heavy lifting. You've done enough for now. So I tried, I slept, I ate. I sat in my garden, watching the birds and trying to ignore the looming battle. I needed to gather my strength. I knew this was far from over. The call came on a bright Tuesday morning while I was tending to the roses. Hello, Margaret. The voice was smooth, professional, and unfamiliar. This is Diane Morrison. I'm Richard's attorney. I stood up, instantly on high alert. I have representation, Miss Morrison. You should be speaking with Patricia. Of course, I just thought we might have a quiet woman-to-woman chat. Off the record, I'm listening. Richard feels terrible about how ugly this has become, she said, her tone heavy with false empathy. The restraining order, the frozen accounts, it's all so unnecessary. He wants to make things right. Does he now? He's prepared to offer a significantly more generous settlement. The house, for example, he's willing to let you stay there for up to a year while you get your affairs in order. And he'll substantially increase the monthly support. All you have to do is withdraw the fraud complaints and sign the revised agreement. There it was, the bait. A year in my home, more money, and an end to the crushing stress and fear. All I had to do was let Richard get away with his theft, from me, from his partners, and from everyone who had ever trusted him. That's very generous, I said carefully. Isn't it, Margaret? Between us, fighting this will only destroy you. Richard has resources. He can drag this out until your legal fees bankrupt you. Why not take the win and move on? I'll consider it, I said. Don't consider it for too long. The offer expires Friday. After we hung up, I stood in the garden with my shears, feeling the seductive pull of the easy path. Then I pictured Vanessa's smug expression and remembered Richard's cold eyes as he planned to leave me with nothing after 43 years. I called Patricia Holloway. They're trying to settle, I told her, but there are strings attached. Let me guess, they want the fraud investigation dropped. How did you know? Because Richard is terrified, Margaret. His firm has launched an internal audit. If you withdraw your complaint, it might all go away quietly. That's what he's buying. And if I don't, there was a pause. Then it gets much uglier, but you have them on the ropes. That's a good place to be. That evening, Jennifer came over with dinner, but she wasn't alone. My son Marcus was with her. I hadn't seen him in months. He lived in Seattle and rarely made the trip home. "Hey, Mom," he said, pulling me into a crushing hug. "Jen told me everything. I got on the first flight out. Something inside me finally cracked. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Dad's being a monster and you need backup." Over dinner, I recounted the whole ordeal, the fraud, the hidden accounts, Vanessa, the threats. They listened in grim silence. "He isn't getting away with this," Marcus said firmly. "Mom, whatever you need, money, better lawyers, a place to stay, we're here. You aren't alone in this." "I have a friend who's a senior financial analyst," Jennifer added. "I've already asked her to review the documents you gave to Mr. Chen. We're going to find every penny." "Patricia says our case is rock solid," Jennifer told me. I realized then that she had confided in someone. "Someone I trust, Mom. You cannot do this by yourself. Please let us help you." That night, after my children left, I sat in the stillness of my home and felt a sensation that had been foreign to me for weeks. Hope. It wasn't that I expected the road ahead to be easy, but rather the profound realization that I was no longer walking it alone. The following day, Richard's attorney called again. "Mrs. Patterson, have you had a moment to reconsider our proposal?" "I have," I replied, "and the answer is no." A heavy silence followed. Then Diane Morrison's voice turned sharp. "Margaret, I strongly advise you to rethink your position. This will not end well for you." "Perhaps not," I said, my voice steady and devoid of anger or fear. "But it won't end well for Richard either. Is there anything else, Miss Morrison?" She hung up without a word. 2 days later, an unfamiliar number sent a text. "You should have taken the deal. You'll regret this. Vanessa, it had to be." I immediately showed the message to Patricia, who added it to our growing mountain of evidence as proof of harassment. "They're rattled," Patricia said with visible satisfaction. "Good, let them sweat." I knew this was only the opening salvo. Richard and Vanessa were regrouping, watching, and plotting their next move. That was fine. I had plans of my own. That Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to church. It wasn't purely for religion, but for the community. As I sat in the back pew listening to a sermon on resilience, 3 different women approached me afterward to check in. Word travels fast in a small town. Some looked at me with pity, but others, the ones who had survived their own wars, looked at me with total understanding. "If you need anything at all, Margaret, you call me," said Ruth Henderson, squeezing my hand. She had divorced her own unfaithful husband 20 years prior. "Don't let them grind you down." I wouldn't. I was finished being ground down. The confrontation came on a Wednesday evening, as twilight began to blanket the neighborhood. I was reading in the living room when a soft, almost apologetic knock sounded at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Richard. He appeared to be alone, wearing his sincere face, the one he used to deploy when apologizing for a missed anniversary or a late dinner. I opened the door but kept the security chain engaged. "Richard, Margaret," he tried to force a smile. "Can we talk? I know I have no right to ask, but just 5 minutes, that's all." Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to shut the door, but curiosity won out. I wanted to see what game he was playing now. I unlatched the chain. As he stepped inside, I saw a flash of movement behind him. Vanessa emerged from the shadows where she'd been hiding just out of sight, of course. It was a coordinated ambush. "What is she doing here?" I asked, my voice turning to ice. "We both wanted to speak with you," Richard said, his tone placating. "Margaret, we've all said things in anger. We've all made mistakes. But it doesn't have to be this ugly. We can end this civilly." Vanessa moved to his side, and I noticed something I had missed before, a large, ostentatious diamond on her left hand, an engagement ring. "You're engaged?" I stated flatly. "Yes," Vanessa said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Richard and I are getting married the moment the divorce is finalized." "How lovely. Congratulations on your engagement to an embezzler." Richard's jaw tightened. "I am not an embezzler." "That's absurd. Margaret, you're embarrassing yourself with these wild accusations. My firm investigated and found nothing. Because they haven't caught you yet." "Listen to yourself." Vanessa's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You're just a bitter old woman who can't handle the fact that she's been replaced." Richard tried to be kind. "He tried to give you a dignified exit, and you've turned it into a circus." "Dignified?" I laughed. "Stealing everything I spent 43 years building is dignified." "You didn't build anything," Vanessa snapped. "Richard built it, his career, his money, his success. You were just there, cooking meals and folding laundry. Anyone could have done that." The words were precision engineered to hurt, and for a second they did, but I had expected them. Is that truly what you think? I asked quietly. That raising children, managing a home, and supporting a spouse for half a century is nothing? It's not nothing, Richard interjected, trying to reclaim the room. Vanessa didn't mean. I meant exactly what I said. Vanessa's mask had completely slipped. I saw the raw contempt and the sense of triumph in her eyes. She genuinely thought she had won. You're pathetic, Margaret, clinging to a man who doesn't want you, making up lies about fraud because you can't accept the truth. Richard outgrew you, you're yesterday's news. And you're what, tomorrow's? I kept my voice even. Tell me, Vanessa, does Richard know you were still married when your affair began? Or that your last divorce involved accusations of financial impropriety? Her face went pale. How did you? I've been doing my homework. I turned my gaze to Richard. Did she tell you she has a pattern? 3 previous relationships with wealthy, married men? Did she mention her real name isn't Vanessa Caldwell, but Vanessa Kim? That she changed it after her last boyfriend's wife sued her? That's a lie, Vanessa shrieked. Richard, she's making this up? But Richard was looking at her with new eyes, eyes filled with uncertainty and doubt. I pressed the advantage. I have the court records, Richard. Her real identity, her history. She is a con artist and you are her latest mark. You, Vanessa hissed, lunging toward me. Richard caught her arm. Vanessa, stop. She's lying, Richard. Maybe, Richard's voice was cold now, but maybe not. We'll discuss this later. He turned back to me, and I saw pure calculation in his gaze. This was never about reconciliation. They had come to intimidate me into submission. It hadn't worked. Last chance, Margaret. Drop the fraud complaints, take the settlement, walk away before this destroys us both. Or what? I asked. Or I will make sure you lose everything. The house, the money, your reputation. I will drag your name through the mud until no one in this town will look at you. I will make our children choose sides. I will? Get out. My voice was quiet but unyielding. They both stared at me. Get out of my house right now before I call the police and report a violation of the restraining order. For a moment, I thought Richard might refuse. But then he grabbed Vanessa's arm and pulled her toward the exit. You'll regret this, he threw over his shoulder. Perhaps, I replied, but not nearly as much as you will. They left, Vanessa's angry voice fading as they walked to their car. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart racing and my hands shaking. Fear coursed through me, fear of how far Richard might go. But underneath that fear was a massive, immovable resolve. They had shown me their true faces. Now I knew exactly what I was fighting for. It wasn't just about money or justice. It was for dignity. It was for every woman who had ever been told her contributions didn't matter. I was not backing down. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early September. 6 months after Richard had demanded a divorce, we were finally facing one another in court. I had barely slept, but I was ready. Patricia had prepared me thoroughly. Mr. Chen had built an airtight case, and I had the truth. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined, almost intimate. Richard sat at the defendant's table with 3 lawyers in expensive suits. Vanessa sat in the gallery, her hand protectively over her stomach. Pregnant, of course. One more manipulation, one more play for the court's sympathy. Judge Maria Santos took the bench, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes. Let's begin, she said. Patricia stood up, calm and professional. Your Honor, this case is about more than a divorce. It is about systematic fraud, the concealment of marital assets, and the attempted theft of community property. Richard's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Harrison Blake, immediately objected. Your Honor, these are unfounded accusations from a bitter spouse seeking revenge. I'll determine what is founded, Mr. Blake. Judge Santos cut him off. Miss Holloway, present your evidence. For the next hour, Patricia and Mr. Chen laid it all out. The Meridian Consulting Shell Company, the transfers of marital funds, the kickback scheme at Richard's firm. Bank records, emails, and financial statements formed a paper trail that Richard thought he had hidden. He hadn't counted on me paying attention all those years. Richard's face grew redder as the evidence mounted. His lawyers whispered frantically. Your Honor, Patricia said, we have also discovered that Mr. Patterson has been underreporting his income to avoid support payments. His actual annual income is approximately $370,000, not the $200,000 he claimed. That's not true, Richard burst out, half rising from his seat. Mr. Patterson, Judge Santos warned, her voice like a whip. Control yourself, I whispered to Patricia, though I wasn't talking about her. He's losing it, I was right. Richard was unraveling in real time, his meticulously crafted facade of a successful professional crumbling into dust. Then, Patricia called her surprise witness to the stand. Donald Grayson, Richard's superior at the accounting firm. Mr. Grayson, Patricia began, could you please describe the firm's recent internal investigation into Mr. Patterson's professional conduct? Grayson, a man of 60 with a distinguished air, looked visibly pained. We uncovered significant irregularities in several high-value accounts managed by Mr. Patterson. Client funds were being funneled to vendors with direct ties to a company called Meridian Consulting. Upon further investigation, we discovered that Mr. Patterson was the sole owner of Meridian. And what actions has the firm taken in response? Mr. Patterson was terminated 3 weeks ago. We are currently cooperating fully with federal investigators to determine the total scale of the fraud. The courtroom erupted into a sea of murmurs. Richard bolted to his feet, his face contorted. That's a lie. Donald, they can't possibly prove. Sit down, Mr. Patterson. Judge Santos's gavel struck the bench like a thunderclap, but Richard was beyond the reach of reason now. This is a setup. Margaret orchestrated this whole thing to destroy me. By exposing your crimes? Patricia asked, her voice a calm contrast to his hysteria. They aren't crimes, it's business. It's complicated and she doesn't understand any of it. I understand perfectly, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was quiet, yet it commanded the room. I understand that you stole from our marriage, from your partners, and from the clients who placed their trust in you. I understand that you intended to leave me with nothing while you built a new life with your pregnant girlfriend. I understand that you believed I was too ignorant, too passive, and too broken to fight back. Richard stared at me, and for the first time in nearly half a century, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. You underestimated me, I continued. You always did. To you, I was just the housewife, right? Just the woman who kept the gears of your life turning so you could chase a career. You thought I wasn't paying attention. You thought I didn't matter. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the years. But I was paying attention, Richard, every single day. And I do matter, my contributions matter. The life I built matters, and I am not letting you steal it. Vanessa stood up in the gallery, her voice a shrill weapon. You're just jealous. You're a dried-up old woman who can't stand that Richard found someone better. Miss Caldwell, Judge Santos said, her tone icy enough to freeze the room. One more outburst and you will be held in contempt. In fact, she looked at Patricia. Miss Holloway, did you state that Miss Caldwell is 5 months pregnant? Yes, Your Honor. Which means, Judge Santos noted sharply, conception occurred while Mr. Patterson was still very much married. Mr. Blake, I assume you are aware that adultery remains a relevant factor in asset division in the state? Richard's lawyer looked ashen. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Grayson, the judge continued, these federal investigators, have charges been filed? They are being finalized, Your Honor. We expect indictments within the month. Judge Santos sat back, surveying the wreckage of Richard's life. He was slumped in his chair, his legal team whispering frantically. Vanessa had gone pale, her hand resting on her stomach. I have heard enough, Judge Santos declared. Here is my preliminary ruling. All marital assets, including those concealed within Meridian Consulting, are to be frozen pending a full forensic audit. Mrs. Patterson will retain sole possession of the marital home. Mr. Patterson is ordered to pay temporary support of $5,000 monthly. I don't have $5,000, Richard cried out. Then I suggest you find employment, Mr. Patterson, preferably one that doesn't involve defrauding the public. Judge Santos's eyes were like flint. We will reconvene in 30 days for the final division, but I will tell you now. You are fortunate this is a civil proceeding, because if even half of what I've heard today is true, you'll be answering to a criminal court very soon. The final hearing took place 30 days later. In that short window, Richard's world had suffered a total collapse. The federal indictment came first, 7 counts including wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. His face had become a staple of the local news, the tragic fall of a respected advisor. His firm hadn't just fired him, they were suing him for damages, and his professional license had been revoked. Vanessa had walked out on him 2 weeks after the first hearing. I heard through Jennifer that she claimed to have lost the baby due to stress, though the timing seemed suspiciously convenient for her exit strategy. She had already retreated to California, posting on social media about her toxic ex and her near miss with a criminal. Naturally, there was no mention of her own role in the deceit. Richard tried to call me several times, desperate, rambling voicemails. Margaret, please. We can still fix this. I made mistakes, but we can work it out. I deleted every single one without listening to the end. The courtroom was packed for the final judgment. Richard looked as though he had aged a decade. His suit was rumpled, his eyes hollow. He could no longer afford his high-priced legal team and was represented by a single, overworked public defender. Judge Santos reviewed the final report from the forensic accountant. Mr. Patterson, over the course of your marriage, you accumulated approximately $1.2 million in marital assets. You attempted to hide $800,000 of that through various fraudulent schemes. This court finds that Mrs. Patterson is entitled to her full share of community property, plus additional compensation for your misconduct. She looked up, her expression severe. Here is my final ruling. Mrs. Patterson is awarded the marital home, valued at $400,000, with the remaining mortgage to be paid by Mr. Patterson as part of the asset division. Mrs. Patterson will receive 65% of all retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and liquid assets. This includes all funds recovered from Meridian Consulting. Richard's attorney tried to protest, but a single look from the judge silenced him. Additionally, she continued, Mr. Patterson will pay spousal support of $6,000 per month for the next 10 years. Given his current lack of income and pending criminal charges, this support will accrue as a judgment debt. Furthermore, he is responsible for all of Mrs. Patterson's legal fees, totaling $85,000. Richard made a strangled, broken sound. Finally, Judge Santos added, due to Mr. Patterson's demonstrated dishonesty, I am ordering that he be permanently barred from accessing or claiming any portion of the assets awarded to his wife. Mr. Patterson, you attempted to use the legal system to rob your wife after 43 years of marriage. You lied under oath and committed fraud. Consider yourself lucky that the consequences today are only financial. Divorce granted. Court is adjourned. Richard sat motionless, staring into the void. His lawyer was already packing, eager to get away. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the exit. As I passed Richard's table, he looked up. Margaret, he whispered, I'm sorry, I am so sorry. I paused. For 43 years, those were the words I had craved. Now they were just empty air. I'm not, I said quietly. Because if you hadn't done this, I never would have discovered how strong I actually am. Outside, Patricia was waiting with a triumphant smile. Congratulations, Margaret, you won everything. Jennifer and Marcus were there too, pulling me into a massive group hug. Mom, you were incredible, Marcus said. The true sense of victory, however, arrived 2 weeks later when the criminal trial began. I attended every single day, watching from the gallery as Richard's lies were picked apart by the prosecution. It took the jury less than 4 hours to convict him on all counts. 5 years in federal prison, a permanent ban from financial services, and full restitution to his firm. As the marshals led Richard away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one last time. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply met his eyes with the calm certainty of a woman who had fought for justice and won. It was a complete, uncompromising victory. That evening, I returned to my home, my house, legally and fully mine, and sat in the garden where this entire ordeal had begun. For the first time in my life, the air felt perfectly clear. The very roses I had been tending the day Diane Morrison first called were in full bloom again, vibrant, fragrant, and pulsing with life. I had done more than just survive this ordeal. I had triumphed. Richard had attempted to strike me from the record, to reduce 43 years of shared history to a footnote. Instead, he had succeeded only in erasing himself. I was the one still standing. 6 months after the final judgment was handed down, I made the decision to sell the house. It might seem contradictory after fighting so relentlessly to keep it, but the truth was simple. I no longer wanted to live within those walls. The house was crowded with ghosts and heavy with the echoes of betrayal. I didn't want to walk past the spot where Richard had coldly demanded a divorce, or the kitchen where Vanessa had stood with her smug, borrowed smile. I didn't need that burden anymore. I purchased a small, charming cottage nestled near the lake. It featured a garden twice the size of my old one and offered a stunning view of the water right from my bedroom window. This home was mine, truly and exclusively mine, bought with the proceeds of my settlement. It was a sanctuary that no one could ever take away from me. Jennifer helped me settle in, and together we painted the walls in soft blues and seafoam greens, colors that breathed a sense of calm into every room. Marcus installed custom bookshelves and a cozy window seat where I could lose myself in a book under the afternoon sun. This is perfect, Mom, Jennifer said, stepping back to survey our work. It feels exactly like you. She was right. The old house had belonged to us, and then it had belonged to Richard. This cottage belonged to me alone. I began enrolling in classes at the local community college, subjects like art history and creative writing that I had always been curious about but never had the luxury to pursue. I joined a book club and forged new friendships with people who knew nothing of my past except for the chapters I chose to share. I finally traveled, first on a breathtaking cruise to Alaska with a group from church, then a trip to Italy with Marcus, where we indulged in pasta and wine while exploring the ruins of empires. For 43 years, I had put everyone else's needs before my own. Now, finally, I was my own first priority. Financially, I was more than secure. The settlement had been substantial, and I had invested it with a shrewdness I'd ironically learned from watching Richard for decades. The monthly support payments arrived like clockwork, garnished directly from whatever meager income Richard managed to scrape together. I even dipped my toes back into the world of dating. Nothing high stakes, just coffee and conversation with a retired teacher named George, who made me laugh and never once suggested I was too old for a new adventure. Life wasn't just good, it was better than I ever imagined it could be. Meanwhile, Richard's life had devolved into a bleak cautionary tale. He served 3 years of his 5-year sentence before being released early for good behavior. I learned of his release through Jennifer, who maintained the bare minimum of contact, holiday phone calls, and nothing more. Upon his exit, Richard moved into a cramped studio apartment in a rough part of town, the exact kind of neighborhood he would have looked down upon in his former life. He found work as a bookkeeper for a small heating repair company, earning a mere fraction of his previous salary. Every month, a significant portion of his paycheck was diverted to me, his former firm, and the IRS. He had filed for bankruptcy, but spousal support is a debt that cannot be discharged. He would be paying for his choices until he was 81 years old. Jennifer showed me a photograph of him once. Richard looked ancient, hollowed out, and defeated. His hair was a stark, brittle gray, and his expensive tailored suits had been replaced by cheap, ill-fitting shirts from a discount store. "He asked about you," Jennifer mentioned quietly. "He wanted to know if you were happy. And what did you tell him? The truth, that you're thriving." I wasn't vindictive enough to celebrate his suffering, but I didn't mourn it either. He had made his bed, and now he was resting in it. Vanessa's trajectory was even more catastrophic. After abandoning Richard, she tried to pull her usual disappearing act. New name, new city, new prey. But the world had grown smaller. An investigative journalist published a scathing exposé on her history of targeting wealthy men. The article went viral, complete with court documents and testimonies from her previous victims. The Black Widow of the Country Club, they called her. Last I heard, she was working in a call center in Nevada, her carefully curated image shattered beyond repair. No more designer labels, no more luxury cars, just the consequences of a life built on a foundation of lies. Sometimes, late at night in my cottage by the lake, I think back to the woman I was just months before this all began. I remember her, timid, uncertain, and terrified of making waves. She was a woman who had allowed herself to be diminished, who had accepted crumbs and convinced herself it was a feast. That woman is gone now. In her place is someone forged in fire. Someone who looked her worst fears in the eye and refused to blink. Someone who finally understood that she was worth the fight. My children see the change too. "You're different, Mom," Marcus told me during a visit. "Lighter, happier, I am happier. For the first time in decades, I am exactly where I am meant to be." One afternoon, while I was working in my garden, a car slowed down on the street. It was a familiar, beat-up sedan, Richard's. He didn't stop or get out. He simply crawled past, staring at the cottage, staring at me. I straightened my back and met his gaze through the glass. I didn't wave and I didn't smile. I just stood there, trowel in hand, surrounded by flowers I had planted in soil that I owned. Then I turned back to my garden and kept planting. When I looked up again, he was gone. Good. I had roses to tend and a life to live. And unlike Richard, I have a future worth looking forward to. So that is my story. The account of a 68-year-old woman who refused to vanish quietly into the night. What did I learn? I learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like patience, meticulous preparation, and the quiet refusal to settle for less than you deserve. I learned that it is never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to rediscover who you really are. What would you have done in my position? Would you have signed those papers out of fear, or would you have stayed to fight? I would love to hear your thoughts. And if my journey helped you, please share it. You never know who might need to hear these words today. Thank you for listening to this tale. Above all, may you always know your worth.